Hello all, it's James Johnson, aka Sulphur Blade, and I'm here with another story. So, the CDC evidently employs a lot of Marxist idiots. As this story reads, CDC employees call out agency's toxic culture of racial aggression. Let's jump into this. More than 1,200 current employees at the Center for Disease Control and Prevention have signed a letter calling for the federal agency to address ongoing and reoccurring acts of discrimination against black employees, NPR has learned. So there's more than 1,200 crazy Marxists working at the CDC in the middle of a pandemic. That really makes me feel comfortable right now. All right, in the letter addressed to the CDC Director Robert Redfield. Wait, Robert Redfield? Where do I know that name from? Was there an actor, a famous actor named? Nah. Anyway, and dated June 30th, the author puts their call for change in the context of the coronavirus pandemic's disproportionate impact on black people and the killings of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and Rayshard Brooks. NPR obtained a copy of the letter, which is published below. Ah, yes, the disproportionate impact on black people. That's easily explained, folks. Anyone that has a brain can figure out why there's a disproportionate number of blacks affected by the coronavirus. Just like there's a disproportionate number of Democrats affected by the coronavirus. What do those two things have in common? Okay, if you still can't figure it out, what about the fact that there's a disproportionate number of people who live in big cities that are affected by the coronavirus compared to those who live in the country? Wait, are you starting to figure it out yet? That's right. There's a disproportionate number of black people that live in big cities. Ding, ding, ding. Real simple. Doesn't take a genius to figure that one out. Anyway, in the light of the recent calls for justice across this country and around the world, we as dedicated public health professionals can no longer stay silent to the widespread acts of racism and discrimination within the CDC that are, in fact, undermining the agency's core mission. The letter reads, the core mission of the CDC is to protect this country from viruses and diseases and any other communicable disease. It's a health fucking organization. It has nothing to do with social policies. It has nothing to do with politics. This is outside of your wheelhouse. Stay in your lane. People I want to call very insulting names. Alright, continuing on. The letter offers a rare glimpse inside a famous, opaque federal agency where career staff often work for decades, and information is carefully filtered to the public through the press office. Yes, carefully filtered to the public through the press office. This doesn't look very carefully filtered to me. This looks like somebody was dropped on their head too many times after they were born. All right, Dr. Camera Phyllis Jones, who was a medical officer at the CDC for 14 years and remains in contact with current employees, says that after the letter was sent to Redfield, it was circulated among the 11,000 person workforce for signatures. So of the 11,000 people working at the CDC, approximately 1,200 of them are crazy fucking Marxists and should get fired. Okay, that's around 10%. Extreme left in the United States, probably around 10%. Alright, it makes sense, I suppose. At least we've got some commonality to the ratio. As of Monday afternoon, 1,204 staff members had signed the letter, and more than 10% of the agency's workforce. Barely. And the number of signatories is growing, Jones says. Is it? By like 1 and 2 signatures every 2 weeks? Jones says she added that at least one division head signed. Oh, a division head. Wow, let's drop the presses. And about 300 employees chose to endorse the letter anonymously. Oh, wow. Only current CDC employees could sign the letter, and each person could sign it only once. Well, gee, I would hope so. Then again, we are talking about left-leaning individuals who are probably like, yeah, let's sign that thing fucking 20 times. Hell, let's send it out. Let's mass send it to like Los Angeles and New York and Chicago and invite everyone to sign it, and we'll call them all honorary CDC employees. Yeah, that's what we're gonna do. And I'm joking, by the way, but you know, that's their method of winning the vote. Just let everyone vote. Just mass mail it to all of the people who don't even live in the United States. We don't care. They're more likely to vote for us anyway. Alright, anyway, going on. Any CDC employee could sign, not just people of color. Okay. Why do we need to point that out? And if it was only people of color, it would be fairly biased, wouldn't it? These are supposedly people that work at the CDC. They should have some scientific background, one would think. But I digress. The racial breakdown of the signatories was not known. In a statement to the NPR, a CDC spokesman acknowledged that Redfield received the letter and responded to it, adding, "The CDC is committed to fostering a fair, equitable, and inclusive environment." Oh God, buzzwords. We got equitable, we got inclusive, the golden words for Marxists, in which staff can openly share their concerns with agency leadership. Letter from CDC employees to Robert Redfield. We are hurt. We are angry. We are exhausted. And ultimately, we fear that despite the global protests, little will be done to address the systematic racism we face each and every day. You know what? You're right. There is systematic racism, but it's not what you claim it to be. It's the Marxist and their apologetic allies who are going after white Americans, trying to crucify them, burn them at the stake, tar and feather them, and anything else they can possibly do. That is the racial emergency we have in the country. It's exactly the opposite of what you morons seem to have envisioned in your head. Alright, let's continue on. Jones says her understanding is that Redfield's response did not address the specific request for action in the letter. I find that disheartening and disrespectful, she says. In the letter, the authors point to a variety of well-meaning yet underfunded efforts to diversify the agency's workforce over the past several decades and asserts that none of them have made much difference. This is the Center for Disease Control. This is the last place we want to diversify the workforce. We want the smartest motherfucking virologists on the planet working there because they deserve to work there, because they actually have the brain power to work there, because they actually understand virology. I don't want some idiot who happens to have the right skin color working there, who doesn't know his ass from a hole in the wall when it comes to virology, working at the CDC. Sorry, not gonna happen. Alright, continuing on. In the letter, the authors point to a variety of well-meaning yet underfunded efforts to diversify the agency's workforce over the past several decades and asserts that none of them have made much difference. They note that black employees represent only 10% of senior leadership and 6% of the CDC's 2019 class of epidemic intelligence services. Well, what is black individuals' ratio in the United States compared to whites? I'm not an expert. I think it's something like 10% anyway, so why should it be higher than 10%? This seems like a normal ratio. To me, nothing seems off about this. A fellowship program described as the training ground for tomorrow's leaders within the agency. It describes an old boy girl network where white managers promote white staff, while allegedly stifling and discouraging black staff, and a pervasive and toxic culture of racial aggressions. It also says that hundreds of equal employment opportunity complaints have been filed by black employees in the past decade, many of them unresolved. Gee, were these equal employment opportunity complaints filed by black employees who actually believe the I'm a black Kool-Aid, I'm a diversity hire, therefore I should have special treatment propaganda? Because evidently 1,200 people do believe this shit in the CDC, and 1,200 is what? About 10%, which is, yeah, you know, there you go. Alright, systematic racism is not just a concept perpetuated outside these walls. The letter reads, it's a crushing reality for the people of color in their daily lived experiences here at the CDC. The authors make 7 demands for action. Oh, demands for action. Just like Antifa, just like Black Lives Matter. Let's tear down the system. Okay, what are their demands? Including diversifying senior leadership. No. Senior leadership should be made up of the best people for the job. If that's a black person, then so be it. That's fine. But if they don't deserve the fucking job, they shouldn't get it because of their skin color. Next. Addressing racism in the CDC culture. There probably isn't any. It's all a bunch of fucking smoke and mirrors because you guys have your heads crammed so far up your ass. You don't understand that equality of outcome is superior to equality of opportunity. If you deserve the job, you should get the job. It shouldn't matter what fucking color you are. Excuse me, I'm getting a little animated. Calm down, calm down. Count to 10. Okay, here we go. So, the CDC had stumbled in its attempts to address the disproportionate impact of the coronavirus on Black Americans and other communities of color. Although data are incomplete, Black and Latino people in the U.S. are at least 2 times more likely than white people to die from COVID-19 and 3 times more likely to get sick. Again, how many people in the U.S. died in New Jersey, New York, and Massachusetts? You combine those 3 states, you will have as many, if not more, deaths than the entire rest of the United States. And there's a disproportionate number of black people that live in New York compared to the rest of the country. I'm not saying that New York is just this huge black city. It's not, but it's, if you compare the ratio of black people that live in New York compared to the ratio of black people that live in the rest of the country, you're going to see a much different situation. But yet we're going to try to spin this narrative that more blacks are dying. Well, yeah, that makes sense because more people in New York and New Jersey and Massachusetts died. Which just happens to be where you'll find more black people than the rest of the country. It's not rocket science. Anyway, continuing on. Congress required the CDC to report data to lawmakers about COVID-19 and racial disparities. But the agency's first report, sent to lawmakers in May, was panned by Senator Patty Murray of Washington as a lazy 4-page copy and paste project that mostly consisted of links to CDC web pages. The agency's follow-up in June was longer, but also incomplete and still inadequate to the task at hand, according to a written statement from Murray. Wow. So a Democrat lambasted these people for submitting a lazy 4-page copy and paste report. And then lambasted them again when they tried to submit it. That wasn't a Republican that evidently lambasted him. It was a Democrat. That's funny. Okay, CDC has been MIA on race and COVID-19, says Greg Millett, who worked as a senior scientist until 2009, and is now at AMFAR, the Foundation for AIDS Research. I think it's telling that here I am sitting on the outside of a former CDC employee, and I've been able to scoop the agency in the data that I've been able to publish on COVID-19's impact on African Americans, he says. CDC has still not really come up with anything meaningful about what's taking place in the black and brown communities around COVID-19. That to me is shameful and shows that scientists who are there, who can do that work, are not necessarily being empowered to do that work. We are hurt, we are angry, we are exhausted, the authors write, and ultimately we fear that despite the global protests, little will be done to address, here we go, the systematic racism we face each and every day. Bullshit. There is no fucking systematic racism in the United States. Stop spinning this non-existent narrative, please. Continuing on. Failing to address racism's role in causing health problems, the author says, is a key reason why we've witnessed little progress in reducing many of these disparities in the United States over the past 50 years. Jones, who left the CDC in 2014, says she feels encouraged to see black employees organizing to effect change. When I first saw the letter, it was a feeling of resonance, she says. I know that this is no exaggeration. Her own work was on racism and public health. And she says she felt thwarted and undermined in her attempts to get the agency to address these issues. She says after a lunchtime presentation she gave on racism, she was asked to remove references to how racism unfairly advantages other individuals and communities off my slide because that made white people uncomfortable. Oh boy. As a white person, the only uncomfortableness I feel about the stupid narrative is that it's a stupid narrative. So if there is some conspiratorial link to an unfair advantage, it has to do with the environment of the community you are trying to judge. So, if large if large chunks of black Americans live in downtrodden chunks of major cities inside of the United States with poor infrastructure, poor access to jobs, poor access to health care, is that my problem as a white person? Or is that government's problem for not fixing it? And if it's government's problem for not fixing it, why the hell haven't Democrats fixed it over the last how many goddamn years? And why is the Trump the only person who's done anything to lift up black communities? Tim Scott, Republican senator, is all about trying to lift up black communities. That's everything he tries to do in the Senate, is something to help the black communities. And he's pushed Trump, and Trump has been willing to go along with Tim Scott's recommendations, and they've actually made some change to better the communities for black Americans. But it's not because of some mysterious, systematic racism narrative. It's because of poor fucking government management. And that's not most of the times at the federal level. Because most of the times when your city is run down, it's not the president's fault. It's the mayors of that city that have caused their city to go to shit. And how many of the major cities have been run by Democratic mayors for how long? When is the black community going to wake up to the fact that if they want to make some real goddamn change in their communities, they can either, one, move to better communities, or two, use the goddamn vote to put somebody in charge that's actually going to better the situation for them. It's not a systematic fucking racism. It's so far from that. But common sense is not something people evidently have on the left. Anyway, continuing on. After she left the CDC, she served as president of the American Public Health Association and taught at Morehouse School of Medicine. I'm sure that... yeah, never mind. Although Millett personally felt supported by mentors during his time at the CDC, he says the environment described in the letter resonated with him too. He's supportive of the letter's organization and hopes it can lead to change at the agency. And there's, 10 to 15% of this crazy country that hopes that there's lots of change in the United States. Hell, they'd like to rename the country to the United Socialist States of America if they could. Anyway, we need more black scientists at the CDC who can help understand what's taking place on our various communities, he says. You know what? We need more scientists of any fucking color at the CDC who actually understand what the hell is going on. If they have a good understanding of their job, then they should be there, by God. But not because they're black, and not because they're Chinese, and not because they're Native American, but because they know what the fuck they're doing. Alright, we're squandering genius, she says. We're squandering insight. We're squandering talent within the CDC that could then lead CDC mission to address the health issue of the nation, which is COVID-19, not systematic racism, you Marxist idiots. Anyway, I am James Johnson, aka Sulfur Blade. This is my content. It was a little spicier than normal. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If so, please leave a like and subscribe. And until the next time, all, peace.